All right, welcome to part 5 of the heat and temperature notes. I love that animation. And today, or right now, we're going to talk about thermal energy and heat. So let's begin. So what is thermal energy? Well, it's defined as the total internal energy of a substance. So we're actually looking at the energy of the particles inside whatever the substance is. So it's the kinetic energy, which is the energy of motion, and the potential energy, which is the energy of position or condition, and in this case, it's basically how far apart the particles are from each other. So if you think of all the way back to part 1 of the notes, and we talked about the distance between the particles of solids, liquids, and gases, if you remember, the distance between the particles in a solid is very small. So the PE is very small. The distance between the particles in a liquid is slightly more than in a solid, so there is slightly more PE, but the distance between particles in a gas is huge, so gases tend to have a huge amount of potential energy. So if you add those two together, you're going to get the total internal energy of a substance. Well, what does it depend on? Obviously, how fast the particles are moving, because that's what gives you the KE. Remember, KE is the kinetic energy, energy of motion. The faster the particles are moving, the more KE. However, it also depends on how many particles you have. So the more mass you have, the more particles you have, and the more total kinetic energy that you have, because you have more particles. It's also dependent, as I talked about earlier, on the phase and the spacing of the particles. The potential energy in a solid is less by a little than that of a liquid, but a liquid and a solid have significantly less PE than that of a gas. Well, what units do you measure in? It's not Kelvin or Celsius or Fahrenheit. You actually measure it in units called joules. And a joule is just a unit that measures energy. So it's an energy unit. We'll talk about another energy unit in a minute. All right, so now let's move on and talk about heat. Love that animation. So let's look. So what is heat? The definition of heat, it's a little tricky. It's when thermal energy moves from one place to another or one object to another. So it's the movement of thermal energy. Thermal energy being the total KE and PE of the particles. So we're talking about movement. So what does this movement depend on? Well, you have to have objects, substances at different temperatures. So you have to have the fire in your fireplace and the air in your room. Those are your two objects in different places, and heat moves into the room because the air is usually colder. So it's always, heat moves from higher temperature to a lower temperature, which you already knew anyway. We're just putting it into words. Again, the units that we use for heat are joules. Calories is that other energy unit that you may be more familiar with. So where do you get your energy? You get your energy from food. What form does it come in? It comes in the form of calories, and calories is just a heat unit, which is a form of energy, so you can actually convert from one of those units to the other. Units of energy. All right, so that ends our take-at-home class notes. Please make sure that your notes are complete and come in with any questions that you might have. We're going to go over some of this anyway, but this will save some time in terms of writing things down. So thanks for participating, and I'll look for some feedback on how you like doing notes this way. All right, bye-bye.